What if I told you that there exists a Souls-like title that doesn't require you to be an absolute sweat to beat it? What if I told you that the same title throws small twists on the formula to make it truly distinct? And what if I told you that it was only the second game developed by that studio? Well, Another Crab's Treasure is all of those things. Developed by Aggro Crab and released in April of 2024, Another Crab's Treasure, with its twists on the formula and unique setting that set it apart from imitators, is a Souls-like title that's more fun than it is punishing. If you're a Souls-like purist, don't worry, there's still a bit of that in here. You play as a hermit crab named Kril, who's minding his own business in the tide pools that he calls home. One day, Kril gets a visit from a loan shark who explains to him that he is currently behind on tax payments and he owes money to the Duchess. Kril, being unable to pay off his debt, has his shell seized by the shark and begins his journey to get it back. It's a very simple premise and enough to get the player invested right away. Without spoiling anything, I will say that the story does a lot more to keep the player invested as the game progresses. This being the second title developed by Aggro Crab, it's understandable why they went with a cartoony aesthetic, and honestly, I couldn't imagine this game any other way. It's visually pleasing all the way from the environmental design to the bosses themselves. This choice also makes the garbage that covers the game's world more pleasing to look at, because it's everywhere. It's in the environment, trash is used as props, and hell, even enemies use it. So not only do you get to explore the ocean with the locales the devs have highlighted, but you get to experience how the trash is affecting its inhabitants. The sound design of the game isn't anything to write home about, but it does serve its purpose by cueing you in on when certain enemy attacks are incoming. By the end of the game, you'll be keyed in on when something's coming, which is a fun layer of interaction. There is voice acting in the game, which performance-wise, it's fine.
Be able to afford the flashy shell in the ocean, you know?
Not if I get there first! Think of all the tourists that treasure could bring to our city!
Well, don't you count out us bottom-siders. You'll be eating your hat when I get that treasure and fix up my restaurant.
The thing that I'm a bit hung up on is a personal pet peeve of mine rather than an actual complaint. One thing that absolutely kills me is when you get a nice, eventful, fully voiced cutscene, then right after said cutscene, having to talk to NPCs who will only communicate with you via text. This kind of thing has never made sense to me because we were just in a cutscene with literally all of these characters. Which this could totally be due to budget constraints, which is understandable, but man, there are just way too many points where there was more dialogue after a cutscene that could have been voiced. But again, I don't know if they hired outside talent to do voices or if this was all in-house. But we do know that the fish noises were done in-house. This being a game that takes place underwater, expect your typical beach outing type music. Most of the music comes off as ambient tracks to listen to while you're exploring. Some environmental tracks really set a tone for when you step into them the first time. Then the boss tracks come into play and do their job well at making a fight feel tense. All that being said, there are really points where music isn't playing, which is okay. It just caught me off guard that there was nothing playing in the background at all at points. Either way, good music all around. As you can probably expect, there's a lot of whimsical areas here to explore, like Fort Slacktide, a fun little sandcastle filled with royal guards and Her Majesty the Duchess. New Carcinia, a city made of trash where the residents of the ocean live and where you can buy and sell the garbage you find. And Flotsam Vale, the most polluted area in the game, filled with tons of garbage, poisonous gunk lines the ocean floor, and all of my old car batteries have found their home here. The deepest parts of the ocean are pitch black and damn near impossible to navigate. There are glow sticks you can activate, but good luck getting to them before getting absolutely bodied. What? Oh, you motherfucker. I'm not even mad. What? So the team has done something that's not easy to pull off. Typically, when a game is set in a singular biome, it's hard to make each area feel different enough from one another. Here, however, I have to give kudos to the dev team because I would have never thought that a game that takes place entirely underwater could have environments that truly feel different from each other. Overall, the environmental design here is outstanding. And since we're talking about environments, let's go ahead and talk about how you navigate your way through them. Most of the time you'll just be walking or running through these areas, but there's also climbable sections lined with netting. Not only that, but you get a grappling hook that allows you to grab these nets from a distance. And it allows you to grab onto fishing lures to send yourself into the water and glide back down. So there's a good bit of platforming sections that break up the monotony of just clearing areas. So when being compared to other Souls-likes, the levels in Another Crap's Treasure are meant to be played in rather than just being walked through. Now, one thing these environments don't do as well as other titles is that they don't loop back into each other, which isn't a downright requirement, but it is something fans of the genre enjoy. If you're familiar with the Dark Souls formula, there's not too much new here, but the game adds its own unique spin on the formula. Before I get into that, I gotta cover the basics. For those of you who have never played a Souls-like title, the basic formula goes as follows. The core loop is traveling from checkpoint to checkpoint, defeating enemies along the way until you reach a boss. From these enemies, you'll gain experience points called microplastics. Use these by resting at a moon snail shell, leveling up stats to increase your health, attack damage, shell resistance, and umami power. I'll get into those last ones in a bit. Dying while holding on to microplastics causes you to drop them. You have the opportunity to recover them, but if you die again before getting them back, they are lost forever. Resting in a moon snail shell or dying respawns already defeated enemies, but not bosses. So there's this inherent risk versus reward system that can either incentivize players to play carefully and meticulously, or resort to speedrun mode and run past all the enemies they can to get to the next moon snail shell. That's a very basic explanation of the Souls-like formula, but I covered the most important bits. Now I need to get into how the combat system works and how it sets itself apart from the other Souls-likes. When fighting enemies, you can try to bash their heads in, but they won't go down without a fight. Most enemy attacks you can just dodge, parry, or block. This is where things get interesting. To block attacks, you must have a shell, but as we learned earlier, Kril had his repossessed. So this is where trash really comes into play. The random shit you find lying the seafloor can be used as shells. See a soda can? Wear it. What about a banana peel? Fuck it, how about an ink cartridge? Depending on which junk you're wearing, your dodges can be slowed down significantly, so you'll have to adjust. Shells serve two purposes. The first is to be your shield in combat. They have their own health bar, so you can plan how long a shell will last in combat before breaking completely. If Kril is out there fighting naked, he'll take bonus damage from enemies, so it's imperative that he has something to hide in. The second purpose is that shells have their own powers. Kril can channel the power of an umami charge to activate a shell power. This is what sells the concept as a whole. The trash you find empowers you in various ways and adds another layer of interaction. Some of these can just be stat boosters or straight up special attacks, while others can heal you over time or cover an escape. The shell concept as a whole is such a fun twist on the formula, and I honestly can't stop gushing over it. Like any good Souls-like, Another Crap's Treasure has plenty of bosses to push you to your breaking point. Some of the bosses can cause a bit of frustration, but they can be beaten without having a gamer moment. Although the game is easier when compared to its counterparts, there were several bosses that put me at my breaking point. And just when I had lost the will to keep fighting, I remembered a quote that has gotten me through the hardest of times in my life.
Who needs courage when you have a gun?
And no, that's not a mod. After defeating certain bosses, you'll gain other powers that can be used without a shell. These also use umami charges, which can be generated by either resting or landing basic attacks on enemies. Remember that grappling hook I was talking about earlier? You can use that to pull in enemies, even bosses, and potentially capsize them. When fighting enemies, every time you land an attack, it fills a meter around their health bar. When that bar is full, if you hit them with a charged attack, it'll stun them and expose their weak point, allowing you to deal massive damage. One thing I was not expecting is a skill tree. By exploring the world, defeating bosses, or defeating enemies with glowing eyes, you'll earn these crystals that can be used to buy skill upgrades to your moveset and a few passives. I won't go through all of them, but they are helpful. One final thing to talk about are stowaways. These little guys are simply just passives that you can wear on your shell to improve a few stats or even get you a get out of jail free card. Too bad they don't actually show up on the player model, but I get it. You can't conceivably model every stowaway onto every shell because that's just too much dev time for such a small thing. One thing the game does that I absolutely love when any game does is that it flat out tells you that you're about to end the game. It's giving you an opportunity to farm a few enemies for experience, hunt down crystals, or maybe hunt down a remaining boss or two. And when you do beat the game, you're sent back to this point. As for replayability, there's really no reason to do it all over again, unless you want to do a no shell run or something like that. So it's mainly a one and done unless you're some kind of masochist. So the game is roughly 13 to 14 hours long depending on how you play it. You could farm enemies for microplastics and hunt down every single item, or just go through the motions to the end of the game. Towards the end game though, it's really easy just to run past all of the enemies since they don't pose much of a challenge at that point and can be seen as padding. Personally though, I think it's at a perfect length. By the final areas of the game, I was getting tired of the formula and thankfully it ended not long after that. There were 3 standout issues I ran into. The first one being at the final boss fight. I won't spoil it, but it did bog down OBS quite a bit. Chances are though that it won't affect most of you, but it's something to be aware of in case this does tax the CPU or GPU more than I think, which if you have newer hardware, I doubt it'll be an issue for you, but for those of you who have older rigs, this may potentially be a problem. The second issue was with one boss in particular. God damn it! Why does he, what the fuck? He fucking teleported on me, bro! That's not fucking allowed. As you just saw, sometimes that happens. It didn't happen enough to hinder the overall experience, but when you're trying to emulate Dark Souls, maybe make sure bullshit doesn't happen. The last standout issue was with another boss. This boss comes in the form of 2 pistol shrimps who will shoot you when you're out of range for melee. So while you're fighting one, the other will shoot you. Unless you manipulate the camera to where you can't see them, then you can just fight them one at a time. So what's happening here is either an intentional design choice for how enemies spawn in and out of screen to save resources, which happens to be an exploit here, or it's an oversight with that same design choice that negatively affects the boss fight. Is it a huge issue? Not really, but it does ruin a fight. Other than those 3, there were points where I'd get stuck and have to finagle my way out, but overall, that wasn't game breaking. I'm not gonna lie, I was not expecting a very engaging story when I started the game. I thought that it would just mainly center around a hermit crab getting his shell back, which it still is, but there's a lot more to it than that. Before I get into spoilers, I just want to say that the dev team turned a very simple premise into something more than, I must get my shell back. There's some goofy shit that happens along the way, but from beginning to end it keeps you engaged, and that's more than what some modern AAA devs can pull off. With everything else covered, click here to avoid spoilers. After Kril has his shell stolen by the loan shark, you take your first plunge into the ocean to chase him down. There are other crabs down here, but something's off. They start attacking you for no reason and you escape to find your weapon, a fork. Since the local government stole Kril's property, the only logical thing is to talk to the Duchess in charge to get your shell back. The guards at the gate won't let you in because you're naked and inform you of where you can get a shell to hold you over. Right when you get your shell, you're confronted with your first boss fight.
Close out, lawbreaker!
Oh, Crab, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to grab a ticket?
Which is pretty easy, but a good starting point for the genre. Now that you know how to get a shell, it's time to head back to the castle and talk to the Duchess about getting your shell back. She's agreed to give you your shell back on the condition that you find some shiny thing for her. You do so, finishing off the quest with a boss fight. Upon returning to the castle, what happened? Why is there more trash everywhere, and why is everyone all of a sudden hostile? You make your way to the Duchess's chambers and watch as she goes crazy and starts attacking you.
Oh, shuck.
I once thought my duchy quite beautiful, you know, worth preserving. But compared to the reefs, it's a shameful, transient thing, destined to wash away. That's why I'm having them tear it down. I thought my beauty worth preserving too. But of course, my worthless life will wash away as easily as any other. Almost as easily as yours, little hermit!
Her fight isn't too difficult, but it's still a challenge at your current level. You beat her, get a short cutscene, and move on from there. Let me take a moment to vent about one of my grievances with the game. In this area, we get a beautiful environment with small but fun characters and a real feel for the level they inhabit. Then, after those introductions, it gets destroyed and becomes a dilapidated castle littered with enemies and obstacles. I thought it was awesome seeing everything transform from being all pretty and relatively clean to something that looks like it could have came from Miyazaki. Throughout the game, you'll run into environments that are already gunked up with garbage, but seeing an immediate before and after is pretty neat, and I wish they did more of that, but this is the only instance. At the other end of the bridge, you run into a character named Firth. He tells you that he's trying to get into New Carcinia to sell his trash for a profit. That should tell you everything you need to know about this character. After talking with Firth, you'll make your way to New Carcinia, the city made of trash and the hub area of the game. Here is where you can buy new shells and stowaways and meet some new characters, like the blacksmith who will upgrade your fork, Nima, who owns a bar and specializes in stowaways, Conch, a museum curator who tells you about the goings-on in the ocean and likes to tell you stories of the old ocean, and Pronath. Hey, wait a minute. He says that the shark sold the shell to him and he'll gladly sell it back to you for the price of 1 billion microplastics. Right after that, you find out it's trash day, where trash falls from the sky and the local citizens go crazy over the stuff. The economy of New Carcinia relies on the goods that come down from above. Then something truly special falls out of the sky.
What is that thing?
I've never seen anything like it.
It's a message from the captain! It's got his face right on it! It's gotta be! My God! If I'm not mistaken, this is part of a map! A map showing the way to a most valuable treasure, I say! If someone were to find its missing pieces and decipher them, why, they'd be rich beyond their wildest dreams, I say!
Before everyone sets off to find the pieces of this map, the mayor stops in to have a word.
Best crab!
Apologies for the interruption, folks. I seem to have misheard something.
If the piano in the background or his bodyguard don't give it away, the mayor, Roland, is the bad guy in case you can't tell. All while this is happening, Pronathan agrees to give Kril his shell in exchange for the treasure, and Kril accepts.
Yeah! I'm gonna find that treasure!
From here, you're set free to cross the sands between. What the fuck? Pagurus the Ravenous. Oh god damn it, what do you, no. Well, sort of. Whenever you trek through the sands between, Pagurus will chase you if you're not in the safe spot. You can take him on now, but I wouldn't recommend it. You're supposed to go to the expired grove first, but you can head straight into Flotsam Vale if you want. Its enemies are tougher here, but you can fight the boss and get a map piece. Believe it or not, I unintentionally did this. It didn't break the game or anything, and it's nice to see that the devs had thought about this ahead of time and gave players the ability to do it. In the Expired Grove, you'll find numerous bosses, one of which has a map piece. And the main boss of the area, Grove Keeper Tepoda.
This place. I thought I made it clear. There's nothing for you here. Has your sense of self-preservation rotted away, even? Or perhaps you truly wish for death?
He thinks you're here to kill him until you defeat him and he figures out that you're friendly.
I'm not trying to kill you.
Oh.
He elaborates that he thought you were here to kill him because of the gunk, which is this oily-like substance that lines the ocean floor and can poison you. This gunk has also been infecting other sea creatures, making them hostile. He then explains that the ancient power of umami flows through Kril, and that's what allows him to use the powers of the shells. He teaches Kril how to harness that power into the form of a pistol shrimp punch used to break apart cubes you've likely seen at least once or twice up to this point. Upon returning to the city and placing the map piece in the cereal box, you're then told to head to Flotsam Vale for the second one. So you defeat that area's boss, grab the map piece, and go back to New Carcinia for the location of the third and final map piece. Because this is a video game and everything comes in goddamn threes. Conch believes Pagras and the Sands Between holds the map, and he's right. Now with all the map pieces, you can find the treasure. God damn it. It's fine, it's fine. Conch already deduced that the treasure is somewhere off the coast of Flotsam Vale, so off we go. And in true video game fashion, you need something else before you can actually move on. In this case, it's a way to power the boat that'll take you from Flotsam Vale to the treasure. There's a sub-area in Flotsam Vale called Scuttleport that we believe has what we need. This area requires you to use the power of Magnus to travel from one battery tower to the next, eventually making your way to the boss. Along the way, you'll run into Firth, who is dreaming about the riches awaiting him, saying he will donate large portions of it to help everyone, which we all know is a lie. Then you get to the next major boss of the game.
Sad, 'cause down in here, it's not so bad. Save crying for another day. Forget it all. Come on, let's play.
She's an electric eel who has a unique array of weaponry that she can power. After defeating her, you get a new power that lets you stun enemies with electricity or to power the terminals found throughout the world. Powering the boat with his new powers, Kril and friends head to the location of the treasure and take Roland head on. After defeating Roland, things go south.
I'm gonna get that
Kril, wait!
treasure!
Hold on to something, y'all!
You are now in the Unfathom, a desolate place of pure darkness. To make a bad situation worse is that you find the treasure and nobody wants anything to do with it. They see it as nothing but useless paper. They'd much rather have plastic, debris, and other useless shit that gets thrown into the ocean. So the treasure hunt is a bust, and everyone is stuck in this abyss. While searching for a way back to New Carcinia, Conch notices that there are relics from the old ocean scattered across the seafloor. He alludes to a powerful artifact called the Perfect World that may or may not lie dormant in these ruins. You and him investigate further and find a mysterious lift. Yep, The old ocean is real and it's filled with enemies. There's a mysterious being that's been telling you for a while now, whispering sweet nothings into your ear, telling you how the world will end and all that fun stuff. It's mainly a tool to keep players interested since it's something new to the story, but I really didn't care about what it had to say. The boss of this area is my favorite in the game. It's an old crab that, when you beat it, molts into its second phase. Okay, well, first tried him. All right, well, he's dead. Now what? Uh-oh, no, he's not dead, he's not dead. Oh no. This is such a cool design. As annoying as it was to fight, I couldn't help but enjoy watching it shed its skin every time I passed its first phase. After killing it, you dive further into the old ocean to find the relic.
By God! This is it! This is it, Kril! They all told me it was just a legend! Those buffoons! The perfect whirl! Do you know what this means, child? The archaeological community will never be the same, I say! With the proper funding, perhaps we can begin to learn the secrets of the ancient hermits. And then it's only a matter of time before... Oh, God damn it!
One of your friends has been possessed by the being who's been haunting you, and you have to defeat them. Now that the final boss is defeated, you can... God damn it. Now's a good time to point out that these 3 fights are all back to back to back. And they are quite literally 5 feet from one another. Not only that, they all have 2 phases each. I get it, they want their most memorable and epic fights towards the end with the climax of the game, but man does it cause a bit of burnout just by having to do them all in a row. Anyway, Firth is a motherfucker to fight. He is the fastest boss in the game and he uses some of your own tricks against you. He will test your patience and it might take a dozen tries before you beat him. When you finally do beat him, things go from bad to worse.
And what better way to start than to beat up a selfish, greedy, muscle shocker like Wait.
New Carcinia gets covered in trash and the citizens are happy for their newfound riches. Which this is either a very good situation for all of them or a nightmare scenario for inflation. You eventually find Pronathan since you deliver the treasure to him and demand that you get your shell back. He refuses and Kril reacts the most appropriate way imaginable. Kril has gotten his shell back, and the game ends. Overall, I enjoyed the story, even though it's nothing crazy or jaw-dropping. It's not the most amazing thing in the world, but I can appreciate that they at least try to keep you engaged all the way to the end, instead of giving you a premise that you stop caring about halfway through. Is Another Crab's Treasure a good game? With a new spin on a very well-established genre in a time where AAA devs can't figure it the fuck out, yeah. From the time Kril gets his shell stolen to when the credits roll, you can tell a tremendous amount of time and effort went into something that became a tremendous game. Let me remind you that this is an indie studio's second title. This is what the result is when you have a group of people who know what they are doing. They knew the genre they wanted to emulate, they had enough varying ideas to make it stand out, and they made it work. The studio has done so well with the game they've created that I'm ready for a sequel because there's a lot more they can still explore. Should you give it a try? Ugh, God, that's really tough, actually. If you've played Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, or anything that falls into the Souls-like category, I think you'll enjoy it. You won't be challenged to the highest level when it comes to difficulty, but I think many of you will enjoy it for what it is. If you've never played a Souls-like or anything near the genre before, I almost want to say this should be your first, but with a caveat. You should know what you're getting into, and I hope I've explained well enough why it may not be for everyone, and that's fine. The last thing I want any of you to do is waste money on a game you won't enjoy, let alone finish. The game can be difficult, but it's not soul-crushing. If you cannot tolerate dying to the same boss or dying in the same area multiple times without making progress, then you should probably stay away. If you look forward to being challenged and intend on seeing it through to the end, go for it. Another Crab's Treasure isn't the first and won't be the last in the Souls-like genre. From environmental design to the use of different crab shells and their powers, it sets itself apart from competitors and is a standout title. While it's not as challenging as others in its genre, it is unique and most importantly, it's fun.